Okay, guys, so let's start over chapter 3, part 2. So if you remember in the chapter 3 part 1 we discussed the definition of internet. We discussed different types of internet connections that one can get. So today we will talk about web, the difference between internet and web, and we'll discuss a couple of attributes of web and ethics and uses of internet. So let's start with the web. First of all, www or web, both are the same things. Www, it stands for World Wide Web. And what is basically a web? Please remember one thing: web is basically an interface through which we access the resources located over internet. So internet is a physical network, while web is basically a logical interface. So there is nothing located over web. Web is it just provides you a logical interface through which one can access the resources located over internet. What does it mean? Like when you just type www.google.com. So the interface is a website, but that particular website is stored on a web server, on a server which is the part of internet. So what is web in fact? Web is basically a collection of hypertext documents located on internet. So as you know, hypertext documents are basically the files which are connected with each other through hyperlinks. Maybe you heard about hyperlink in Microsoft Word. Hyperlink. And in order to create these web pages, we use a programming language called HTML, hypertext markup language. So again, we create a website and we actually put links of the website to connect with some other pages as well. So in simple words, the internet is a physical network of interconnected computer systems. While web is an interface through which we access those resources. So please remember, nothing is located over web. Web is itself, it is located over internet. Next is the next and the concept of GUI. Next was basically this was basically an American computer and software company. And this particular company was led or founded by Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, he actually started this company back in 1985 when he resigned from Apple. So he started another company called Next to design computers and software and all that stuff. Next, they actually introduced their computer. They actually launched their first computer, which is called Next Cube. And Next Cube was the most powerful computer at that time, back in 1988, because it was introduced in 1988, the most powerful computer, and that was the first computer where they introduced the concept of GUI, graphical user interface. So they actually introduced the concept of GUI. What is basically GUI? Is basically visualization. Like you can visualize your hard drive. So GUI is basically, it allows users to drag objects across computer screen. So if you see, like with the GUI, you can actually visualize the resources on your monitor and all that stuff. Before the GUI, there was no visualization of your hard drive. It's like a command line kind of interface, CLI interface, where people, if you want to watch a video, you need to write a command, something like that. Web is basically, it's the idea of GUI was basically adapted in web. In the web, there were two scientists. One is Tim Berners and second Robert Calloy. So these two scientists, they actually invented web. And what is web? Web is nothing but the GUI of internet. Web is GUI of internet. So whatever is stored on the website, on that particular server, the website provides an overview. Like you can see what is basically located on that particular server. In order to actually access web, what you have to do is users can use software application, which is called browser, to access www web and internet. So you can access web, in fact, and then eventually the internet. So what happened? These two scientists, as they introduced the concept of web, it got a lot of attention from other countries, other parties as well. So what exactly? So then in 1992, United States Department of Defense, what they did is in 1992, Department of Defense US hired Tim Berners, and they asked him to bring consistency in the web. Like it should be up to date, up to mark, should have the modern standards and everything. So what the Tim Berners, what he did, he actually founded a consortium called W3C, which is World Wide Web Consortium. So where they invited the people across the globe and asked them to actually resolve the issue of consistency, and started working on developing the internet protocols. The first web, which was designed or invented back in 1990s, it was Web 1.0, which was just readable. So you can only read the contents available on the website. Then in Web 2.0, which is basically launched in 2000, and that particular made the websites writable. Now people can write comments, you can post, you can actually like somebody's video, you can download and all that stuff. Web 3.0 is basically, they made it executable. Like you can go live on YouTube, you can go live on Facebook, and whatever you're recording, it can go directly on the servers. A few attributes of the web. One is the called URL. URL stand for Uniform Resource Locator. And what is basically a URL? URL is something like that, like HTTPS, www. For example, google.com. For example, let's say Scholar. So here, if you see, there are three components. One is the protocol. HTTPS is a protocol, hypertext transfer protocol. www, the internal part, is called domain name, which identify the company, in fact. The last file is called the file identification, which particular file you are looking for or you are interested in. So URL, if you want to define what is a URL, so definition of URL is, it identifies the particular file address on www. So on World Wide Web, it actually identifies a particular name, or particular file name, in fact. Next is the protocol, like HTTP. Protocol is basically set of rules for communication. The definition is set of rules for communication. This is called protocol. There are many protocols of web. The one which you have seen is HTTP. It defines how page will be displayed on the web. Okay, on your computer, in fact. Then there is a protocol called FTP, File Transfer Protocol. responsible for how the data will be transmitted. Data transmission. How data will be transmitted, like uploading and downloading. There are many other protocols as well. Domain name, as I mentioned earlier, domain name is basically like it identifies the company name and their nature of business, something like that. www.ggc.edu. That's called domain name. It is the domain name. With .edu, it is called TLD. Please remember, top level domain. Top level domain. Okay, and ggc is basically the name of company, name of the server. .edu is the nature of business, also called top level domain, the highest level in the domain name hierarchy. Like you might have seen, for example, www.au. For example, edu. For example, uk. That's defined the country where that server is located. The next is the web servers, a web browser. Web browser is basically a software application through which internet resources can be accessed. So that is basically what the web browser is. Google Chrome, which is owned by Google. Google Chrome, as the name suggests, owned by Google. Internet Explorer or Internet Edge or Explorer, owned by Microsoft. Then we have Firefox, Safari, Apple product. Firefox is a separate company. You might heard about plugins. Plugins are basically the extra software that you can add with your browser. For example, if you want to play a Flash game, you need to install a Flash player with your browser. Then you can play a Flash game over internet. So plugins are basically software that can be added to a browser to increase its functionality. So that these are called plugins. Next are the filters. Filters are basically, they actually limit the material the browser actually fetch. Limits the material that browser fetch. Parents use search engine filters to restrict offensive material from displaying on computer monitor. Other than that, how we can do the file settings, the filter setting is browser preferences. It's under browser preferences. The last agenda item is ethics and internet. First of all, let's talk about the definition of ethics. Ethics is basically like socially acceptable behavior, or you can define ethics are basically standards, principles, and guidelines that help to guide one's behavior towards the people. This is called ethics. Then we have another very close thing which is called morals. Morals are widely accepted standards of behavior that enable people to live in groups. Then morality is basically the values of particular group, of a particular group at a specific point. So what exactly they think at a specific point or a time instant, that's called morality. So now, what are the ethical computing guidelines? Like, for example, when you use computer, what are the things that you need to know about, or what things that you need to take care of? Firstly, use digital devices in such a way that shows respect to others. Secondly, consider the consequences of output you create on digital devices. There are many other things that you have to take care of, like avoid plagiarism, don't copy someone else's stuff, etc., etc. Don't do the cyber harassment, that's a crime. These are the stuff that also you need to take care when you use internet. Ethical employee behavior. Employees should actually follow the acceptable use policy while using the organizational resources. So one thing is basically the business owners copyright holders, and network administrators. Administrators publish acceptable use policies so that users can understand what is expected, and permissible when they use network and computer equipment, software or equipment. Like most of the time, whenever you want to install a software or use a software, sometimes it happens you see you have to accept the terms and conditions. Those terms and conditions are basically the acceptable use policy. We already talked about EMS, employees monitoring system. Employee monitoring system, it's basically practical for smaller organization, but if you have large number of users, then it becomes impractical because of some potential misuse, or you can say sometime it will be impractical to handle the large amount of data, but it's a good tool to actually monitor the activities of the people. Last thing is the geolocation, and some of the software they actually find without letting you know, they are basically tracking your location. Okay. What is, first of all, geolocation? Geolocation is process of identifying physical location of a person. This is called the geolocation. Now, how the geolocation or the exact location of anybody can be calculated, can be found. So most of the geolocation software, they use satellite and variety of wired and wireless technologies to pinpoint your location. What exactly these stored on these geolocation database? Please remember one thing: whenever you use Google Maps and all that stuff, you're not basically directly getting data from satellite. You're basically connected with Google database, and you're getting data from the Google database, and that database is connected with the satellite. Okay, so geolocation databases are used to store information about specific locations and their coordinates. Last is the sometime you can also, again, those the same thing, the social networking sites, they also use the geolocation databases to find the location. So location based monitoring used by many social media websites can be used for exact location tracking of individuals. So that's it about internet and their different attributes. If you guys have any questions, please do let me know.